There's a motion at the desk. The clerk will report the motion.
Torkelson moves that House File Number 622 be taken from the table.
Representative Torkelson moves that House File 622 be taken from the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Torkelson moves that the action whereby House File Number 622 was given its third reading be now reconsidered.
Representative Torkelson moves that the action whereby House File 622 was given its third reading be reconsidered. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moves to amend House File Number 622, the second engrossment, and the amendment is coded A16-1269.
Recognize Representative Torkelson to introduce the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's my amendment.
Discussion on the Torkelson amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Would Representative Torkelson yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Representative Torkelson, which amendment are we on? Doesn't say. Oh, it's in the DE amendment? Do we have the language?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do not have the language yet.
So, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry?
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
So the bill that we're going to be voting on, we don't have the language?
They're being handed out right now, Representative Thiessen.
Well, I mean, all of our members need it. Will Representative Torkelson yield for another question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. In addition to the items that showed up on the spreadsheet, is there policy language and other types of language in here that aren't related to kind of money items on the spreadsheet?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my knowledge, the bill is all about capital investment and spending. There may be some language items in the transportation section.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. And if Representative Torkelson could tell us what section that is?
Representative Torkelson.
That would be in Article 3.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. I mean, I understood that there was like language about oil train safety and other items in this bill, and I'm trying to find where that is actually in the language of the amendment.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It starts on page 55 of the bill.
Representative Thiessen.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Speaker, we have a couple of. I see Representative Torkelson has some amendments. We had a couple of members that wanted to offer amendments to the bill. We've been informed by the revisers over on the other side that they are unable to draft amendments.
Further discussion on the amendment.
This is an amendment to the amendment, so Torkelson has an amendment.
There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mr. Speaker?
Representative Considine.
We still don't have a copy of the bill.
They're coming around.
And
Representative Considine.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. How long is this bill? I haven't seen it. How many pages is it? Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I'm doing that wrong again.
He will yield.
Chairman Torkelson.
Representative Torkelson.
Chair Torkelson, how long is the bill?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Considine, the bill is 80 pages long, and most of this has been previously debated.
Representative Considine.
I just wondering how long we're allowed to read it.
Further discussion. There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moves to amend his amendment to House File number 622 as follows, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A16-1274.
Representative Torkelson, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is to get some of the numbers in proper order in the DE.
Any discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have a copy of the amendment that this amendment is amending, and I would request that you not call for a vote on the amendment to the amendment until we have copies of the amendment and the amendment to the amendment.
Members, amendments are being handed out. All of the amendments are also posted online as usual, so you can access them online. Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would Chair Torkelson yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Dean.
Chair Torkelson, can you just at least tell us what lines 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5 do? What projects you're adjusting the dollar amounts to?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first part of the amendment, page 9, line 32, adjusts the natural resources asset preservation number, reducing it from $30,866,000 to $25,866,000.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And will Representative Torkelson yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So was it an adding error that had you off that amount of money, or do you reduce spending, or did you have spending in the bill that you're now not having? How can you be off that many million?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This involves the addition of a project to the bill.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If Representative Torkelson will continue to yield. Mr. Speaker, if Representative Torkelson will answer the question, what project are you adding to the bill?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative. One of the projects is the Polk County Waste Treatment Facility in Polk County, and as soon as I get the others, I will let you know.
Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just have to state here that you mentioned that we can easily get these amendments online, but connectivity is very, very bad and slow right now for whatever reason, probably because we're all trying to access these online. Thanks to the pages for running around so furiously. And I'm sorry that everybody's in this position of not being able to read and understand what we are supposed to be voting on in mere minutes.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, Representative Halverson has made almost exactly the same point I was about to make. I am waiting for this to reload here so that I can read the amendments, but it's not coming, so I have a point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Can we wait to vote until we can read the amendment online?
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you. This amendment involves a correction, actually. There were projects were added to the bill that are in the language of the bill, but the adjustment to the numbers is to fund those particular projects. Those particular projects are the Dorothy Day Center, the Hermantown Health Center, the Orinoco, I believe that's a water project, and finally the Polk County Solid Waste Facility.
Representative Hillstrom.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we were informed that the reviser can't draft amendments to this bill. So is it only GOP amendments that are going to be accepted to this bill tonight, Mr. Speaker, or is there someplace else that we should see if we want to have an amendment to this bill, Mr. Speaker, that I've just received?
I will take up all amendments that are at the desk. Representative Thiessen.
Appointment of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
So did you just say that we're going to take up amendments at the desk, which are only amendments that can be drafted by the GOP?
I did not say that.
You
I said
no.
I will take all amendments that are at the desk.
Mr. Speaker,
Representative
point of
Thiessen.
parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Representative Hillstrom just said that the reviser can't actually draft amendments to this language, which we just got. And so if they can't draft amendments to the language, and we just got the language and haven't had an opportunity to draft amendments, how can we get the amendments to your desk?
We are on an amendment to the amendment, which according to our House rules cannot be amended. So we can have this discussion after we discuss this amendment to the amendment. Okay? Further discussion on this amendment? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment. We are now on the Torkelson A16 amendment as amended. Discussion on that amendment.
Mr. Speaker?
Representative Thiessen.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Did we do the A43 amendment?
It is another amendment, so we need to deal with, it's an amendment to the underlying bill.
Okay. Well, Mr. Speaker, on this amendment, on adoption of the DE amendment, again, we just got this maybe half an hour ago. We went out in the hallway to caucus, which is obviously not the best situation to be in. Representative Majority Leader Pepin came out and said, we got to get back in here. You've had 13 minutes to review this 80-page bill and talk about it. That doesn't seem like a particularly good process. We have a delete all amendment here that we can't offer amendments to the amendment to because we can't actually have amendments drafted. So I guess I will come back now to my parliamentary inquiry to you.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
What is a member to do who just received this language in order to offer an amendment when the revisor's office can't draft amendments to this language?
Representative Thiessen, I will take all amendments that are at the desk.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, can we all start handwriting our amendments to this bill, and will you take handwritten amendments?
Representative Dabney.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Please state your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, custom and usage of this body has been to allow oral amendments. Given the difficulties we have in not having received the bill, not having been granted sufficient time to review the bill, and having challenges in getting written amendments in an orderly fashion, will you follow with the custom and usage of this House and allow for oral amendments to the bill?
Are you wishing to offer an oral amendment, Representative Dabney?
I'm considering it, Mr. Speaker.
We're on the A16 amendment as amended. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the A16 amendment as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moves to amend House File Number 622 as amended, and the amendment is coded A43.
Representative Torkelson, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment adds the Orinoco Wastewater Collection and Treatment Facility that was inadvertently left out of the bill.
Discussion to that amendment. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adoption of that amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 622 as amended.
Third reading.
Mr. Speaker, there's an amendment at the desk.
You just said
Discussion
we
on
were
the bill.
going to
Final passage, House File 622. Discussion.
Mr. Speaker, wasn't that a primary amendment?
He has my amendment.
I got one
he
at the
has
desk.
my amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on the bill.
Mr. Speaker,
My amendment.
I would move that we reconsider third reading, and I'd ask for a roll call.
Representative Thiessen moves reconsideration of third reading and requests a roll call. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Let me see your calendar. There being 57 ayes and 75 nays, the motion does not prevail.
Mr. Speaker.
Discussion on the bill.
Shut off my
Representative
mic.
Considine.
Thank you. Didn't you just say that you would take all amendments that were at the desk?
We are on third reading. Amendments
No,
are not
I mean,
in order.
prior to that, you said you'd take all amendments that were at the desk. I have put amendments up there. So has Representative Hansen. What?
We are on third reading. There was a motion to reconsider third reading. It failed.
Okay,
Amendments are not
parliamentary
in
inquiry
order.
then.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
You just said that you were going to take all amendments that were at the desk. Are you or are you not?
There were no amendments at the desk
Yes,
when I
they
called
were.
for third reading.
Yes, they were.
Discussion on the bill as amended.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
The last amendment we voted on is the A43, which according to the online version is listed as a secondary amendment to the A16-1269 amendment. However, there was no vote on that underlying primary amendment. I believe we arrived at third reading in error. Would Mr. Speaker be willing to...
We did vote on the underlying amendment. Representative Thiessen.
Mr. Speaker, that actually, Representative Freiberg is correct. That was an amendment to an amendment. And you didn't take it as an amendment to amendment. You took it as a straight-up amendment. We voted on the underlying amendment before you took up the amendment to the amendment.
It was an amendment to the bill as amended. Any further discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Just vote on the bill. Representative Pepin.
I move to reconsider third reading.
Representative moves to reconsider third reading on House File 622. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Torkelson yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Torkelson, my community college, the Brooklyn Park Community College campus, was on the priority list for MNSCU, and I don't see it here in the bill. So, Representative Torkelson, can you please tell us, one, why it wasn't in there? And if I want to make an oral amendment to add the Brooklyn Park Community College where it should have been from MNSCU, where is it that I would orally amend that, Representative Torkelson?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hillstrom. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to highlight projects that have been added to this bill since it was last on the House floor. We have added the Plant Growth Research Facility at the University of Minnesota. We've added the Hibbing Community College in Hibbing, Minnesota. We've added Winona State University, a project of $25 million in Winona. We've added the Grand Rapids School District Rife Center for $500,000. We've added Olmsted County Dyslexia Institute in Rochester for $1,500,000. We've added flood mitigation grants, increased that amount from $3.5 million to $11.5 million. Increased asset preservation at the Natural Resources from $12 million to $25 million. State trails, we've increased from $6 million to $11 million, including the Gitchigami Trail, the Heartland Trail, and the Prospector Trail. We've added the Polk County Waste Processing Facility. We've added a physical security for the state capitol complex, $10,500,000 that was not in the bill before. We've added a number of transportation projects. I'm not going to go through all of them. We've added the Como Zoo for $12 million. We've added the Family Partnership in Minneapolis.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Torkelson, I just specifically wanted to know if I want to make an oral amendment to add my community college because it was on the priority list, and the Speaker has said he would take an oral amendment. I had an amendment ready. I want to know, Representative Torkelson, where is it in this bill that you've written that I should amend or ask to amend? I believe the Hennepin Technical College was asking for $8,231,000. So, Representative Torkelson, it was on the priority list, and I'm trying to figure out if I want to ask the Speaker for an oral amendment. What section of the bill, what line specifically should I amend, Representative Torkelson? You're presenting this bill.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To add anything to the bill, you would have to decide where you're going to take money away. We cannot add to the $990 million of general obligation spending to this bill unless you know what you're going to take it away from.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If Representative Torkelson would yield to another question then.
Representative Torkelson.
Representative
Hillstrom.
Representative Torkelson, can you explain to me why you skipped over certain priorities and picked and chose? And in particular, I have nothing in my area that's in this bill. And Representative Torkelson, you're asking me to vote for this proposal that I had 5 minutes ahead of time. And what I'm saying is, I'd really like to vote for a bonding bill, but right now my proposal's not in it. You skipped over the priorities of MNSCU, and I'm trying to figure out how I can amend it so that I can vote for this bill.
Representative Torkelson.
I did not hear a question there, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Hillstrom.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Torkelson, can you please explain to me how you picked and chose your priorities in the MNSCU system and skipped over other priorities within that very same system?
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you. In any bonding bill, we make choices about the items that are selected to be in the bonding bill. They're all
projects. We have to pick the ones we can afford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I have an amendment at the desk. It's printed out. There was some sort of a drafting error. This kind of thing happens when we do these things in the last minute. It's language that's been agreed to by first responders, railroads. It's bipartisan.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hornstein moves to amend House File Number 622 as amended. The amendment is coded MB-A12.
Representative Hornstein.
Members, this is language that's been agreed to by the railroads and by first responders. I'd urge a yes vote.
Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recommend a green vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted.
Okay.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think you have an amendment. I hope you can read my writing. It is an appropriation of $12 million for the State Highway and Robert Street with trunk highway bonds. I don't believe that an appropriation of trunk highway bonds would affect the budget resolution. I'd move the amendment.
There's an amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend House File Number 622 as amended. Am I supposed to read this here? Page line 80.26, insert, quote, for a grant of $12 million of trunk highway funds to the city of West St. Paul for Robert Street construction. Is that it?
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is in addition, and its trunk highway is not affecting the budget resolution.
Very difficult to take. I can't even tell if it's in the proper format, but it's not, we're kind of messy. We're going to get this over to the Senate, and let's get to it gross.
Representative Hansen.
Mr. Speaker, I would draw the amendment.
Representative Considine.
I withdraw the amendment.
Seeing no further amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 622 as amended.
Third reading. Discussion on House File 622 as amended. Representative Liebling. Any further discussion on House File 622 as amended? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. Clerk will close the roll. There being 91 ayes and 39 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.